Doing its thing. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Samuel Boss and our tastings. Jeff Boss here, live from our shop up in 358 Forward Road, our second shop where we do all of our virtual tastings now. Lovely. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to be looking at the amazing world of rum. Very excited. We've got an incredible lineup here for you. Usually, when we do the stream, you'll always see Hannah. So Hannah's usually the person here. You've got me this evening, which we're quite excited about. She's off moving house. So well done, Hannah. Hope your house move is going okay. And joining us this evening, very, very, very excited to welcome Dean MacGregor. There he is, and he's going to be taking us through some amazing, incredible rums. We've got some incredible lineup, really interesting stuff. Really excited to show you the diversity and the range of perhaps what is my favourite spirit in the world. So yeah, Dean, what have you got for us?
Some of the you just said, some of the finest spirits in the world. I quite enjoy these tastings because the majority of people are muted, so they can't argue when I say rum is the best category in the world in the spirit category. Unless we start doing them in the flesh again, we might have some people bite back a little bit, but again, I'm ready for you. But yeah, my name's Dean. I work for a company called Specialty Brands, and we work with Jeff and Samuel Boss very, very closely. So today we thought we'd put together like a more of a category session, focusing on different islands, different production methods, and completely different styles of rum, just really like showcasing just the diversity and how great it is. And whenever anyone says they're not a rum drinker, they just don't know that they are yet, essentially. They're not wrong, they just don't know it yet. Because there's so many different styles, so much diversity out there. And I'm hoping you'll find something new and exciting this evening. So yeah,
Excellent.
Something stuff.
If you want to leave any comments, any questions, I've got Facebook here open. You can Facebook us, and I will put some questions to Dean if you want. There's also a little box in the chat, and you can type here, and we'll monitor that and bring any questions up throughout the show as well. So I hope you enjoy. Sit back. If you're watching this on catch up, we do have a lot of people who come and will buy the packs and then watch it the weekend. Hi, hope you had a good time. Welcome to the weekend. But yeah, shall we start? I mean, I'm excited to crack into some of these. So where are we going to start?
Well, I've got I'm not going to bore you all by doing a presentation, but it's more pictures to kind of transport us off to. I'm not sure about you, but in Reading it's a little bit grey and a bit grim. So we're going to transport ourselves off to Barbados first. I think it's a good place to start, really, because give a little introduction to rum, really, before we jump into Barbados. So rum is one, as I mentioned earlier, the most diverse spirit, I think, the most diverse and therefore interesting spirit categories out there, mainly because it's all made from sugarcane. So sugarcane being the crop is a type of grass, which nowadays grows all the way across pretty much the tropic bands, so all across the equator. Sometimes as far north as the southern islands of Japan, all the way down to Australia and South Africa as well, you'll find sugarcane growing. So nowadays you'll find rum being produced everywhere. Wherever there is sugar, rum is never usually that far behind. And quite often you'll actually find rum being produced in countries like Scotland. Obviously far from tropical, but because molasses travels quite well, you can produce rums there. I've just been watching a lot of Antipodean parts unknown. He's just been in Newfoundland, just off the east coast of Canada. They have a really, really rich tradition of producing rum as well, called Screech.
Really?
If you have come across it, yeah.
Never known.
Yeah, I used to work with a Canadian, Danish, British guy, and he used to go to Newfoundland and talk about Screech rum. Got very excited about it. So yeah, rum is made everywhere, even places you might not know it. So essentially it's made from sugar cane. You can make it from the fresh sugar cane juice. And then once you process sugar, you essentially would boil it down and concentrate it. That's called syrup or sugarcane honey in some circumstances once you centrifuge it. And the more you process it and remove the sugar crystals, you're left with molasses, which is like a sticky black treacle, which is what 90% of the rums in the world are made from. It's also a major ingredient in barbecue sauce. So a lot of you will be having a lot of molasses very, very soon, this May bank holiday, I hope. and it's in Holland and Barrett, which means it's good for you in small amounts, surely. But you'll find because molasses is a stable product, you'll find it rum being produced everywhere. That's what you'll find in Scotland and Newfoundland and places like that. So sugar essentially spread all the way across sort of central and south of Asia from Papua New Guinea, where it originated. It then followed the Arab spice trade all the way across the north of Africa through the Middle East until the 1400s, when the Portuguese and the Spanish colonized the Madeira Islands. They started cultivating sugar on a mass scale there. But we're going to focus mainly on the Caribbean and a little bit of South America today. So I'm going to show you a little, bam. So here we go. Here's sugar spreading.
1 second. Here we go. Sorry.
Here we go. We've got it now. Yeah. As I mentioned, this is a little, instead of me describing it, you can see it in the arrows. And then it kind of spread all the way across, say, with the Arab trade, all the way across to the Canary Madeira Islands. So sugar back then was its weight in gold, so it was very, very profitable. But when you talk about rum, I know I mentioned all these other countries that produce rum, whether it be India, Australia, Papua New Guinea. When people think of rum, they quite often think of the Caribbean and Central and South America. So that's where we're going to stick to today. We're going to transport ourselves over there. So originally, the very first island to be colonized was actually Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492, trying to find a new trade route to the Indies. Proved the flat earthers wrong as well. And he actually made landfall in one of the Bahamas islands up here. He then sailed down and made the first landfall down in modern day Haiti. We've actually got Haitian rum a little bit later on. And then on his second voyage, he brought sugarcane cuttings with him. Every time he discovered, or sort of found, I should say, rather than discovered, a new island or a new country, he would always leave things that you can get a bit of money for back home, sort of like tobacco, cotton, and sugarcane, and then would sail on and essentially colonize and look for riches and gold in Central and South America. It was actually the Portuguese and the Dutch that sort of settled in Brazil, what is modern day Brazil, and they started producing a huge amount of sugar back then. And that was when sort of the rest of Europe really realized how much money you could actually get for producing all this rum. So the Dutch were actually an integral part. They eventually got pushed out into like Guyana and eventually introduced sugar to Barbados. So I love these little old-timey maps. So Jamaica and Barbados are seen as sort of modern day, sort of the birthplace of what we call rum today. Like in whiskey, it's contested whether it's Ireland or Scotland. In the sort of rum world, it is widely known that Barbados was first. And then when the British sort of established their colonies in Jamaica, it swiftly followed there as well. So as soon as the sort of Dutch introduced sugar to Barbados, the British warmed very quickly to booze, as you can imagine, as did the French. And it was kind of said that when colonizing a new nation, the Dutch would build a fort, the Spanish would build a church, and the British would build a tavern. So you can imagine rum ran rampant across the British islands. So as soon as they sort of snapped up what's known as the Lesser Antilles, the smaller islands that kind of arc all the way down, so your Barbados, your Trinidad, Grenada, Martinique, for example, everyone started growing huge amounts of sugar. So you started seeing these all crop up, huge sugar plantations. When there was a waste product, much like throughout history, if you've got a waste product that has some sugar and you can ferment it, you'll end up drinking it and turning it into booze. Mm-hmm. So that's what happened over in these sort of islands. So you started seeing, whether it be molasses, sugarcane juice, whatever was left over, people started fermenting it and having a good time, essentially. Thus, rum was kind of born. So here's your basic, so back in the basic way of producing rum. So you'll have your raw ingredient, your sugarcane, you will cut and then mill down and produce the sugarcane's juice. The sugarcane juice is what's quite precious. That's where you can get your sugar crystals from and your sort of old school muscovado, if you like. Then you'd process that into molasses. You'd leave that to ferment, much like single malt whiskey, but we don't have to process it because it's already loaded with sugars. You distill it, potentially age it, and then obviously last step is to enjoy it. There we go. So originally you'd started seeing big stills like that from sort of Europe at the time of the sort of 1600s. So it had been big, heavy pot stills. So again, very similar to that of making malt whiskies. You'd have these big pot stills, which were essentially like kettles. You sort of load in your fermented molasses or sugarcane juice or combination of. As you heat it up, all of your sort of vapor, the alcohol will vaporize, as will all the different flavor compounds, and then come on over. So big, heavy, rich flavors, essentially. There's no kind of filter on it. You're just like, once again, in kettle, everything comes over. We'll talk about these a little bit later on when we get to Jamaica. So lots of rums will be made that way. So very big, very aromatic. So much so they were referred to as Kill Devil and Firewater originally. We've come a long way since then, fortunately. So the British and the French were making rum that way. The Spanish islands were actually banned from producing rum for many centuries, mainly because Spain produced a lot of wine and a lot of brandy, and they didn't want their new colonies making money off of their new spirits. So they wanted them to buy them from Spain. So they actually banned Spanish production in sort of Central and South America and on the likes of Cuba for many, many years. So when that ban was lifted towards the early 1800s, late 1700s, they started experimenting. They're obviously a few centuries behind in sort of skill and know-how to the British and the French, who are swilling it quite frequently and spreading it all across the world. So they started using new technologies, and they started using what's called a column still. So these were the very first coffee stills. These basically got lots of little plates with perforated holes in. So your vapor can arrive all the way up to the top, essentially, but then only the lighter sort of elements and the lighter flavors can make their way to the top. So you end up with a much lighter spirit. But because it's a column and it's continuous, as long as you're pumping in your fermented wash, you're getting a rum out the other end. Usually a higher ABV and slightly lighter, more elegant, some would say. That's when you started seeing the different styles of devolving. Instead of having just heavy rums, you could have light and heavy, and then you started seeing people blend them, again, like Scotch whiskey once again. Then, slightly less romantic, you started seeing these. These are from the 1960s. These are super efficient, run 365, 24/7, produce a rum about 95% ABV, super elegant, very fresh, great for making sort of mojitos and daiquiris, but very, very light, and some would say a little bit neutral. Just to give you, the rum we're going to try today is all very traditional, so it's like these two. So that's basics. So that's what we're going to talk about. So now we're going to jump onto our first rum. If you want to pour out Veritas, it's quite a clear, quite hazy, quite straw kind of color. I love this one. So as you're pouring that, have a little nose, have a little sip, enjoy, while I tell you a little bit about Barbados. We're actually going to sort of go full circle and finish up in Barbados as well. So Barbados used to have hundreds of distilleries. I mentioned it was colonized at first by the British in the early 1600s, 1627. Sugarcane was introduced 10 years later. And then by 1651, the word rum is being used for the very first time in text. So they went from having no sugarcane to rum in the space of 14 years, and in fact, it being everywhere and being the drink of the islands. That's how quickly wow. It was adopted by the British. And soon you saw hundreds and hundreds of small plantations all across Barbados. And as I mentioned, if you're producing sugar, you're quite often producing rum as well. So you'd have hundreds and hundreds of distilleries, and people enjoying them on the taverns, in the plantations, on the island as well. Nowadays, there's just 4, many closed, mainly because of a lot of consolidation, a lot of bigger businesses swallowing up the smaller ones, a lot of the smaller ones going out of business, for example. But we've seen a bit of a resurgence in sort of new distilleries. So up until the 90s, there was only 2. So you've got West Indies Rum Distillery here, and you've got Mount Gay. Mount Gay is the oldest registered rum distillery in the world, which is where we're going to finish off. And then these two, St. Nicholas Abbey was created in the 90s in an old Victorian abbey. It's beautiful. And Foursquare down here. So Foursquare is a family-owned distillery by the Seal family. So they own the Dawley's brand and the Foursquare brands, a few others as well. They're like 4th generation rum blenders, but in the 1996 they actually bought their own distillery and started doing everything by themselves. So you've got, here it is, surrounded by sugarcane. There's a cricket pitch, I believe, just here, and they sponsor their local cricket team. Much better than get sponsored. I'm not sure who sponsors our cricket team, but it's not a rum brand. Much better, much better. I was about to say Pucker Pies, but that's snooker, isn't it? But it's still much, much better to be sponsored by a local rum brand. And they produce beautiful, beautiful rums. They're pretty much picked up best rum distillery in the world the last like 4 or 5 years running. The IWSC, which is the International Wine and Spirits Competition. And he is the master, essentially, of sort of balance and flavour, very, very elegant rums. And he has teamed up with, here we go, here's all of his rum barrels. Someone asked him, Richard, like, how do you temperature control your aging warehouse? He's like, quite simple. I leave a big hole in the roof, so you get a lot of breeze coming through. Because Barbados is very flat. It's actually not made from volcanic activity. It's actually made from limestone coral. So it's a very flat place. That's why it's called Mount Gay, not mountain. And they've actually got all of their aging warehouses. They have solar panels, so they're turning very green as well, which is great to see. So here's the rum itself. So it's actually a collaboration between a rum brand we're going to have next, called Appleton Estate, from Jamaica. So Richard basically wanted to make a rum sort of he's called it, even though it's not white, he wanted to call it a white rum just to sort of shake things up a little bit. Because quite often people would say, a lot of people from experience, a lot of white rums, a lot of clear rums tend to be, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit light, a little bit elegant, a little bit floral, but a little bit not the most exciting. They're great for mixing, but it's not something you'd really sip on its own. So he wanted to try and buck that trend. So this is 47%. Majority of this is, so he's made a lighter rum, which is aged for 2, which is completely unaged. He's made a heavy pot still rum. So he's put some. Here's Richard here. And he's almost smiling in this picture. It's hard to get a picture of Richard smiling. He's a very happy chap. He doesn't like the camera. And this is Luca from an Italian chap, which I'll talk about. He's involved in 3 of the 6 rums we're going to try today, including this one. So Luca took Richard to Appleton Estate in Jamaica, which is one of the most traditional distilleries on the planet. They use wild fermentation and everything like that, but we'll get into that shortly. Basically, they make a really heavy, fruity Jamaican-style rum. So Veritas is basically a blend of Richard's really subtle, elegant rums with a little bit of Jamaican funk, with no sugar, no caramels, no nothing added or taken away, which is why it's called Veritas, which means truth.
And does Richard do the blending for Veritas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Richard does all of the blending. I'll just stop sharing for a second.
I've been very lucky to visit the Foursquare Distillery when I've been to Barbados, and it's a fascinating place to go see, because it's when you get there, if you've ever visited other distilleries, and there's usually like a visitor centre and a tour, especially the ones that we're used to in Scotland. And when you get there, it's almost like a museum with nobody in it. It's completely like really empty, and you're expecting people to be like scurrying around, and a lot of people sort of working in there. And you can just kind of like walk all the way through the distillery. They've got like a heritage centre which kind of like displays a bit about life in Barbados, if you through the history. But it seems, and you can walk through and you can see the pot stills, all like hidden away, and then all the barrels. And it's crazy because like there's almost like nobody there at all. It's like a very sort of modern distillery. But yeah, literally like you feel like you're trespassing a little bit as well. So I've been very lucky to go through there and have a couple of tours. One with Richard as well, which was quite amusing, which I won't go into. But yeah, it's a fantastic place to go visit, and quite different from the other sort of distilleries as well. I've been to St. Nicholas Abbey, and that was like quite really sort of like small and craft as well. But yeah, quite an interesting place to go visit.
Yeah, it's like so kind of like Disneyland. I think they've got some Airbnbs they've just started as well. So once we're allowed to travel as well, you can Airbnb at Foursquare. So
wow.
And another advantage is really close to the airport, so it's a nice little stop off before you go.
Yeah,
I seem to go home.
Yeah, it's just like north of Grantley Adams, isn't it? So it's yeah, you can literally get in the airport and then like 20 minutes later you're at the distillery. It's not a particularly big place either, is Barbados either. So, but the east side of the island is like very rugged and very hard to get to, and everything's like on the coast and then on the west side as well, which is but yeah, if you have the opportunity, it's a great place to go. This is a fantastic rum, really, really stunning, isn't it? It's loads of character to it as well. That fresh, really lovely sort of style with that funk coming from the Jamaican bit underneath. I bet it tastes great in a daiquiri as well.
Oh yeah, so Richard, he wanted, he always says, like, I don't make sipping rums, I make, every rum should be a sipping rum. So that's his sort of ethos. So yes, this is, you can sip this, enjoy this neat, but this is basically made for, as you say, daiquiris, mojitos, and tonics, things you'd enjoy when the sun's out a little bit. It's great, like a little rum punches. Absolutely. Rum and ginger ale as well is a favourite of mine.
Oh yeah, that'd be delicious.
Yeah, I love this. And the bottle as well is like really, really sort of just stripped back, very traditional. He lets the liquid do the talking. He doesn't like all of the sort of the bells and the whistles.
And it's a white one, but it does have a little bit of colour to it as well. Is that from, I guess, a bit of partial aging in there as well?
Yeah. So there's 3 components to this rum.
Yeah.
So he's got a light rum from his column stills. So I would show you a picture of a column still, but it's not the most exciting. It's basically 2 metal cylinders. Hard to get an exciting picture, which is completely unaged. Then the pot still rums, the heavy, fruity, funky rum from Jamaica is unaged again, but then the sort of heavier rum from Richard's pot stills are aged for 2 years in ex-bourbon barrels, just to sort of, I guess, soften them, get more of that sort of lovely sort of toffee, vanilla, and sort of butterscotchy kind of nose coming from it, flavors. It just brings extra balance, I think. I think originally Richard, he did say that we wanted to be completely unaged, but this worked.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, big fan. Not gonna lie, I'm missing my daiquiris. I can't wait for things to open up. And
yeah, daiquiris are fantastic.
Yeah,
it's not
having a daiquiri. Yeah, having a daiquiri at home on your own is not quite the same as having it.
Not really the same. definitely not.
Yeah, but rum and tonics, simple as that. Or like daiquiri, rum, lime, sugar. If you're getting a bit more, so rum, the daiquiri is the holy trinity of rum drinks. You got your rum at the top, obviously, your lime and your sugar. So it should be 2 parts rum, 1 part lime, and then 2 parts lime, 1 part sugar, essentially. Well, 4-2-1 should be, and that's essentially with the dilution coming into it as well. So that is your most basic punch recipe. So in the Caribbean, especially Barbados, they have a little rhyme: 1 part sour, 2 part sweet, 3 part strong, 4 part weak, 5 a little bit of spice to make it nice. And that's basically how you can make your little rum punches. People obviously do flip the weak and the strong around a little bit. But yeah, the lime, the sour would be your lime, your citrus, your grapefruit, your lemon, for example. Your sweet would be your sugar, obviously. Your strong, your weak, it'd be either just water or some coconut water, pineapple juice, ginger beer, or something like that. And then spice, rather than being like a Scotch bonnet chili or anything like that, is like a little bit of nutmeg or cinnamon or something along those lines. So when we can start having more than 6 people in our gardens, you can make punches as small and as big as you like.
Yeah, I cannot wait. And there's a bit going on at the moment with Richard about trying to recategorize rum as well. I don't know if anyone would be interested in that. And what's your take on that, Dean, as well?
I think it's a good move, mainly because people understand. So he's been working with Lucas, the guy in the sort of the stripy shirt, the picture I showed you a minute ago. They've been working together because they have the very similar ethos, kind of traditional rum made a traditional way, no additives, no smoke and mirrors or anything like that. And they're kind of looking at how to categorize rum. It's mainly because like whiskey is categorized as like age statement, whether it's a malt, whether it's a single, whether it's a grain, whether it's a single malt, whether it's a blend. And people start to understand that. And American whiskey and Scotch, people understand they're very different. But a lot of people will say, I would like a white rum. And that starts to confuse things, because some rums, like Diplomatica, that we're going to try later, they actually produce a rum which is 6 years old, because it's been aged for 6 years in the barrels, but is totally clear. So they've charcoal filtered it. Whereas the Séjoux, which we're having next, again, completely unaged. And white, gold, and dark don't really give you much idea of what's actually in the bottle that you're drinking either. It gives you no sense of like what the flavor intensity, what it's going to taste like. So we're kind of steering away from that as well. And there is the sort of Spanish, French, British sort of styles. But again, as people progress, as new distilleries open, those sort of classifications are getting a lot more muddy as well. So they're kind of looking to move towards sort of the Scotch kind of. So if it's from a single distillery, from a pot still, it will be a pure single rum, or a traditional pot still rum, or something along those lines. If it's a blended rum, a blend of pot and column, it will be like this. Although this is from 2 distilleries. And if it was from a single distillery being a blend of rums, it would be a single blended rum, for example. So they're kind of moving towards that. And right at the end, we've actually got we can talk about this a bit more depth as well. We've got a pure single rum. This is kind of showcasing that in one sense. So yeah, it's a new way of looking at rum. I've got a couple of slides as well to sort of show you when we talk about Hamden and how different brands would fit into this new proposed kind of way of looking at rum, rather than white, gold, and dark. Yeah. Because once you try this will taste like no other white rum you've ever had. Clarence Séjoux, which is what we're going to have next.
So this is the next one up.
So it's called Clarence Séjoux. Let me just get my pictures up. The right one this time.
Beautifully presented. Really love the box that comes in.
All right, can we see that?
Yep.
So we're going to kind of look at so that was like the British influence on kind of rums. Now we're going to kind of look at the French kind of influence of rum. So the main sort of French islands now are up here. The main rum producing ones are Martinique and Guadeloupe. And Haiti used to be part of the French. It used to be the wealthiest French colony, all the way up until 1804 or slightly before that. So it's a very, very different place. But all of these islands, and Haiti as well, use sugarcane juice instead of molasses. So you've got, this is Martinique. It is actually part of France, so they use the euro, drink a lot of wine. You actually get good champagne and things there. It's skip through here to Haiti. Yes, they drive on the right-hand side and you use the euro. It's like the longest internal flight ever. But again, it's a stunning island. A bit more tropical in the north, where around the volcano. We've got big banana plantations and tropical fruits, and then a lot drier, a lot more sort of more beach resorts in the south. So you can get a bit of everything there. But we're going to go to Haiti. So Haiti used to be part of the French Empire, but unlike the rest of the Caribbean and the world, in fact, they had a successful slave rebellion. So rum it's all very well and good talking about the amazing daiquiris on the beach, the rum punches, but rum did have a very, very dark history as well, which you can't really skirt around or avoid. So Haiti was kind of the only island, or I say island, only country in the world that's had a successful slave rebellion where they rose up, defeated their captors, if you like, and then established their own government and remained that way. So much like the rest of the Central South America and the Caribbean, many slaves brought over from Africa, the west coast of Africa, and forced to work on the plantations. Imagine conditions weren't very well for them. They were like treated as subhumans almost. So as hundreds of thousands, millions of slaves were brought over, they started to gradually sort of overpopulate sort of the rich Western plantation owners. So spurred on by the French Revolution in the late 1700s, 1790s, the sort of middle class, working class in Haiti started to want more rights, as did the slaves. And I think the slaves wanted an extra 1 day off and the stop of the use of lashings, which they turned them down. So gradually you started seeing different pockets of slaves rebel. And by the 1804, they had eventually risen up. They had defeated and pushed the French from the island. They had pushed back the Spanish back into what is Dominican Republic and defeated the British, who tried to get in there as well. So they managed to defeat all the three superpowers of the time and become their own country. Because of that, no one traded with them. They became sort of left to their own devices, if you like. So there's been very little sort of industrialization, modernization, and westernization in Haiti. So it's very, very different to the rest of the Caribbean. So you won't find beach resorts and you won't find like McDonald's and skyscrapers or anything like that, or anyone taking, or any influencers taking selfies and stuff on the beach. It's very much its own place. And where there's been a lot of consolidation in the rum industry, like Barbados now only has 4 distilleries, Jamaica only has 6, Guyana has 1. There's over 500, it's hard to put a name on it, but there's 500 little shacks all across Haiti producing what they call Clarence. So Clarence is basically a sugarcane spirit, but it's made from the sugarcane juice and it means clear. So, and it's usually sold in plastic bottles. There's probably more spirits in the world drunk and consumed in plastic bottles than there is glass, and especially in Haiti and like Brazil and places like that. All the best stuff comes from little plastic bottles on the side of the street. So it's a very, very different culture. It's very, very different to, say, the likes of Barbados, which is a very wealthy, westernized country, and their rum is so different. And because Haiti used to be kind of the jewel in the crown for the French, there was an awful lot of sugarcane there. There was an awful lot of coffee as well, grown in the mountains. That is all still there today. And because there hasn't been much westernization, you won't find many GMO foods. You won't find any sort of artificial pesticides or anything like that. It's all very, very natural. And about 70% of the population live off agriculture. So biodiversity is huge over there. And you'll find just some pictures of sort of these little villages I fortunately got to visit when I went there. It's a beautiful, beautiful, stunning place. Port-au-Prince, obviously, everyone knows of Haiti from the natural disasters. The 2010 earthquake really, really did suffer. It was about 7 miles outside of the capital, Port-au-Prince, which is, like many capital cities, very chaotic, very overpopulated. As soon as you leave Port-au-Prince, it takes you about 2 hours. You just come into this rural, beautiful rural landscape, like rolling mountains, very, very different, and lots of sort of market and back town culture and village culture. And the way they make their rums are very, very different. So you've got this is the still, for example. They grow their sugarcane. Now the sugarcane are natural varieties. The rest of the world will use what's called hybrids. So much like corns and barleys and things like that, you can sort of splice two together to kind of create a hybrid. So they grow taller, faster, bigger yield. Whatever, Haiti has some of the most traditional original canes that you won't find anywhere else on the planet, and they all do taste slightly different as well. They thrive in different terroir, different environments, which is why.
Would that impact the flavour of the final rum as well, the individual canes?
Yeah, it does. So Luca visited Haiti first time in 2012. He'd never been there. And Velia had never been there, so they wanted to sort of understand the country, the culture. The language they speak over in Haiti is French, but they also have Creole, which is kind of like a French dialect, a sort of local dialect you'll find all across the Caribbean. And unfortunately, they speak a little bit of the language. They kind of went there to understand how it's produced, meet the different distillers, see how it fits into the culture. And every little village will have their Clarence producer. Clarence meaning clear. They do have a couple of rum distilleries. They see rum as more of an export aged product. Haiti is what the locals, it's the drink for the people, essentially. So every little village will have a couple of Clarence producers. You'll find these sort of like 4-gallon plastic drums on the side of the road sometimes, and they're just full of Clarence. Yeah, it's everywhere. So as you drive through these little little villages up to out of Port-au-Prince. You'll see little fields of sugarcane, a little shack with some smoke where they're distilling. The smell of funky fermentation going on. It's everywhere. It's amazing. And yeah, and all of the sugarcane tastes slightly different depending on where you grow it as well. So as you can see, this is the production. It's stripped down. There's no it's the fresh sugarcane juice. It's crushed to release the sugarcane juice itself. No processing whatsoever. It gets fermented wildly in whatever sort of vessel. Danny was one of the producers, for example. He was like, "Oh yeah, these are our mango wood vats." And he was like a sort of rum nerd or whiskey nerd was like, "Oh, what? Why do you use mango wood vats? Is it because of the extra flavor? Does it work good with these?" And he was like, "Well, I have a mango tree plantation here, so I use the mango trees." And so it's all very much very, very local. What people have, it's very different to sort of the modern sort of distilleries like Foursquare. But this is the way things used to be done, and it just hasn't changed in small little cultures. You'll still find little places like this in Brazil, making cachaça. But yeah, it's fascinating.
And I guess almost like a parallel, like a connection with some mezcal producers, because that's going to kind of be in the same sort of vein, like small lengths that you get in mezcal production as well. So yeah, just kind of like very tiny, almost like a folk drink, I guess. It's really, really tiny, small batch sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So like that's such a good analogy, sort of the tequila mezcal, because tequila came afterwards, and it is kind of new technologies, slightly more refined, made in more populated places, sort of less connected to the land itself, and they only use one variety of agave. Rum essentially has evolved from Clarence and spirits like this. So these are still the small producers in the mountains, like, as you say, like the mezcal producers, using wild sugarcane varieties. Everything grows as nature intended. They're not kind of in nice, neat rows that make it easy to harvest. It's kind of, if bananas thrive there, so does the sugarcane. And it's all very, very, very natural and all very good for the environment and the sort of nutrients. Yeah, it's just it's the way things used to be done.
So I'm guessing the production is going to be really, really tiny. I mean, they can't make a huge amount, and it won't be on a scalable. So I guess we're quite, I guess, privileged and quite lucky to be able to actually drink this sort of stuff as well, because there isn't going to be much of it around.
No, that's what we were saying. So the one that we've got now is the Clarence from Monsieur Séjouz. So Michel Séjouz is where the A is up here, in a little village called Saint Michel d'Atalin. And that was his distillery. This is his distillery. You've got bananas around here, you've got sugarcane in a little valley down here. It's a very lush area. But he can't produce any more than this. So if we want more, we'll have to start working with more producers. So we've got a range now of five individual producers, all using different sugar canes in different parts of the country. So you can see how their Clarence changes and differentiates. It's really cool, really, really cool. So this is quite a high ABV. I think you might have the new vintage. So this should be the 2018 vintage, but I think you've got batch 2.
Oh, this is 2018, bottled at 56.4.
Yeah, so you've got batch 2. So we've bought 2 batches from Michel here. So mine's 55.9, so yours is slightly higher. There is no dilution, which kind of shows you each batch is slightly different. It all depends on the yield, the environment, the weather that year, his cuts. So everything's like a vintage. So all of the kind of wine fans and spirit fans get very, very excited about this.
It's absolutely stunning. It's really, well, it's clear, but it's also very crystal clear as well. Amazing on the palate.
So there's absolutely no dilution on this whatsoever. This is what it comes off. This is what it's sold. And this is we were the first, well, this company is called the Spirit of Haiti. They've partnered with a Haitian family called the Barbancourt-Lingues down in Port-au-Prince, who do all of the bottling, the labeling and everything for us. So it's a 100% Haitian product from start to finish. It's there. And this is, you can still find this if you were to visit Michel Sejou's, his little village. You can still buy this on the side of the road at the small village, at the small markets and things. So it's still there. It's not made for us at all. It's what he makes that we liked, which is why his name is on the bottle.
And that must be fascinating that there are.
Here he is.
Oh, there he is. Zoom up on him. But it's fascinating that there are over 500 little mini micro distilleries doing things in a very sort of traditional way, and we get to we get the opportunity to actually taste this really. Most, I guess, spirits now have been industrialized and then monetized, but this, as you're saying, there's no difference between really this that we're drinking out of the bottle and the stuff that's coming out of the plastic containers on the side of the road. So we're really having like a snapshot of what's actually happening. Almost like a folk drink. This has been untouched really by sort of commercialization, and also the fact that you say that it's naturally fermented, wild fermentation as well. A lot of parallels in the wine industry with natural wine. I mean, it's probably a little bit more of a step to call this a natural rum, but it would fit into that kind of category, slow food movement. And then also, I guess, with like lambic beers, which are spontaneously fermented as well. So there's a lot of parallels, I guess, with other sort of links with other drinks.
And on the bottle, we actually do work with slow food.
Oh, great.
They have, there's 12 producers sort of protecting, so slow foods sort of works with different communities, kind of keep traditions going, so they're not forgotten. And yes, there's 12 producers working, who we are working with slow food. So they also make sure everything's above board, so it's all fair trade and everyone gets, it's all as it should be.
Wow, it is unlike any other drink that I've ever tasted. Slightly that bright citrus, and then almost like a sort of sour kind of note to it as well. It's absolutely stunning.
I love this. This is one of the favorite rums that we've got in our portfolio.
so good.
You can if you've got a couple of glasses, you can just leave it for later on and just keep nosing it. I haven't even sipped it yet. Right.
Well, the measures that we send out are 50 mils, so I'd say leave a little bit and then stick it in the glass, come back to it, and keep trying it, keep having a little taste. And then cocktail recipes. I mean, what would you make out of this?
I usually drink it on its own, but it works very well. I say a daiquiri works very well with citrus. Pink grapefruit soda. So if you can just get some pink grapefruit soda, a bit of sugar, just to sweeten it up a little bit. That works really, really nicely. And then a Negroni, actually, strangely, works.
Oh, wow.
That sort of minerality to it. It works really, really well with Negronis.
It's got, again, it's so complex. There's so many layers of flavour on there as well. And I can see, it's got a little like that fresh citrus, sour, herbal sort of edge. And that would really, again, would be great with like a touch of vermouth as well. So I can really see that working in a Negroni. It's incredible. But yeah, very.
So if you're feeling, if you've just gone down at Tesco's or somewhere, and you just want to grab some ting, I'm not sure if you have ting at Star Boss, but it's just grapefruit soda.
I know it.
Great. Anything like grapefruit citrusy works fantastic. So really, really nicely, and pineapple as well. So anything sort of fruity. But I get like that sort of pineapple skin, really ripe green banana. Let's say fresh grass, cut grass, like botanic. Lovely.
Yeah, it's stunning. And the other clarins that are in the range as well, we do stock them all in the store, but I'm guessing you're getting, again, lots of different variations between all those as well. So
yeah, absolutely. So we're working with 5. So we've just launched our 5th our 5th producer, if you like. So 3 of them are named after the distillers because they didn't have names for their distilleries. So it was like, this is the Clarence of Mr. Sejou's. They're all from different parts of the country. Some are from sort of the claw, if you like, the bottom of the claw, the south. on the south coast. So they use a different sugarcane variety. So it's a lot more coastal. So you get more of those minerality influence, more of that sort of salty saline sort of notes to it. There's another guy that uses a different type of variety, and that's on the north coast of the southern claw. So I could say crescent, but I prefer claw. He uses a slightly longer fermentation. He starts using like citronella, sort of citrus fruits, and sort of ginger and other things in his ferment just to get it going and bubbling. His is slightly more cheesy, a bit more savory, a bit more tomato water. Some of the distilleries in the north use, it's a term that I'm going to use for Hampden, they use called dunder, which is kind of the leftovers from the previous distillations left in the still. Again, that's very sort of flavor heavy, so that becomes a little bit more funky. So they all taste completely different. That one's great for a Bloody Mary, actually. If you're going to Le Rocher, it's called. That's your Sunday 11 a.m. between 2 p.m. kind of Clarence. So they all bring something, and they're all very, very different, and they're all, well, 4 out of the 5 are crystal clear as well. So it kind of dispels that myth of, I'll have a white rum, please. Because if you give someone this, or I'm going to use Bacardi as an example, you could not get further apart. I think if you gave someone who loves this a Bacardi, they'd be very disappointed. And likewise, if you love someone that loves Bacardi and those lighter rums and you gave them this, they would be very, very disappointed as well, and very misunderstood what you've just given them.
So yeah, it goes to show you can't judge a rum by its colour.
Yeah.
Oh, I could drink that all day.
Yeah, and he's a lovely guy, Michel Sergius.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm friends with him on Facebook.
Oh wow!
Yeah, lovely bloke.
That's absolutely stunning. And plans to bring more across. I guess it must be quite an exciting adventure going out to Haiti and then trying to discover all these different Clarin producers as well. So
it was, because there are hundreds. Like we drove past. I was fortunate enough to go to visit Michel Sergius. Just show you the map once again. And
I guess quite rudimentary, sort of like pot stills as well.
Yeah, it really is. So from Port-au-Prince, it takes you about an hour and a half to get out there, and you can either go, depending on the weather and the roads, because outside around here there's no tarmac, so it's all kind of dirt tracks. And to get to Michel Sergius is about a 6-hour drive. You have to cross a couple of rivers. It's a real adventure. You need a 4x4. So all the other different producers are here, and we've got a new one from here. Different landscapes. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. And then the pot stills. Yeah, so I'm not sure you can see, but here there's a little 5 or 6 plate rectifier, based on like an old French still. Like if you've seen Armagnacs, but Armagnacs usually have the pot with the column straight on top with the little preheater. It's very similar to that. It's great.
Wow.
I did have a picture with a couple of chickens running around as well, because it is a farm after all. So, yeah, direct fire using the dried. These are all the banana plantations behind, and that's another house building there. And this is Michel himself. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely love that. So where to next?
We're going to go to Venezuela now for something very, very different.
Wow.
I'd have a little sip of water. So we're going to go to Diplomatica now, Venezuela. So Diplomatica is slightly different from, So this is a new one, Selection de Familia. It's absolutely stunning, this one. So Diplomatico are based in Venezuela. It's a huge country, huge sugarcane producer, huge amounts of sugar, and a couple of really big rum brands as well. So I'm going to show you some better pictures that are on this one. There we go. So other brands would be like Santa Teresa and Pampero. Pampero are owned by Diageo, and Santa Teresa have just had their distribution rights bought by them from Bacardi. They make very, very light rums that then result in a lot of aging, which is a very sort of Latin American way. So I'm going to share my screen again and sort of talk you how the evolution of sort of the lighter style of rum. We're calling it the sort of modernist rums. There we go. Like the art movement, the modernist movement was in the 1900s, which is not, we've passed that. So I think it works quite well. So this really happened, sort of the evolution of sort of the lighter style of rum. So whilst Cuba were experimenting, I love this. This is an actual sort of advertisement that Bacardi used in the 1930s and 1940s onwards. Uncle Sam flying over to Cuba with a daiquiri in hand.
On that.
Yeah, amazing. So during Prohibition, once Cuba was kind of the home of the sort of the lighter style of rums. They started steering away from the pot stills and producing a much lighter style of rum. And then during Prohibition, sort of 1920, 1919 to 1933, America obviously couldn't drink. Thanks to Al Capone, it was more moist than dry, I've heard, from all the readings I've done. But people get swept away and they would enjoy and basically treat Cuba either like, again, I've read in different sources, it's been referred to as the Paris of the Caribbean or the Amsterdam of the Caribbean. So two very different experiences people have clearly had there. And people were sort of swilling away, drinking really beautiful light rums, drinking daiquiris, mojitos to their heart's content, having lots of cocktails named after starlets of the time, like Mary Pickford, for example. And then when they came back, they would sing the praises of this very light style rum. So it became hugely popular. Once Prohibition was kind of lifted, it took a while for the American whiskey distilleries to get up and pumping out whiskey once again. So it takes a few years to age. People started drinking this lighter style of rum. Fast forward to 1959, when you had the Cuban Revolution. You saw a lot of people leaving because everything got nationalized. So the Bacardi family had already moved to Puerto Rico. A couple of other families had already moved over to sort of Dominican Republic. And a lot of the rum producers and rum makers, they're called the Ronero Maestros. So the Maestro Roneros, they left. And they took their methods with them. So they would go off to the likes of Panama, the likes of Guatemala, other sort of Spanish-speaking countries in Central and South America, and take their rum making with them. So I believe Tito, who is one of our Roneros, he learned from an old Cuban maestro over in Venezuela. So a lot of those countries use the very light style of rums like this. So this is when you start seeing crossover styles. So we're going to pop over to Venezuela now. So the lighter style of rum started to spread throughout. So you'd find those pot stills that I showed you in every country now, because it's basically after the 60s, people started drinking very light whiskies. They started drinking light rums. They stopped drinking Manhattans and started drinking woo-woos and things like that. It was a bad time for flavor, basically. So you saw the spread of these big stills. So the big pot stills were being replaced by the big columns, which was good for economics and light style of rums, but bad if you love big flavor. If you like Flavor Town, it was a bad time. Diplomatico, however, make things slightly different because they were created in the 1959, their distillery. I have a picture of Dusa. So here are some of the stills that got brought over. They were just created by a company called Seagrams, which at the time were a big Canadian spirit giant. And they brought over these big different stills to make different spirits in Venezuela at the time. Venezuela at the time being, well, still is very oil heavy, very oil rich back then. So you start seeing these stills were brought over from a Canadian whiskey company. They used to make Canadian whiskey. You started seeing pot stills come over from Scotland. We had column still as well, came over from France. So we could make, at the distillery, they could produce lots of different, different styles of rum, and at first different types of spirits in general. So they started making Gordon's gin and etc. for Central and South America out of what was called Lusa at the time. So in 2002, a family called the Ballesteros family bought the Diplomatico distillery, and they renamed it Dusa. Distilleral, my Spanish is terrible, but basically it means distillery united, united distillers, essentially. And they focused on Diplomatico rum. So they actually, rather than making rum like all of their other neighbors, that very light modern way, they use the stills that they had at their distillery. So they make big, heavy pot still rums. They make sort of medium-bodied rums with lots of creamy and tropical flavors. And they also make a very, very light rum as well. So in all of their rums, because they've got quite a range, I think it was back in November. I've been sat at home for so long. I believe it was November. We did a Diplomatico tasting. We have a full range. So each one of the range is slightly different blend, a different ratio of the different stills themselves. So the one that we've got today is the Selection de Familia, which is 90% pot still of these big pot stills here, the big heavy rums, aged for 12 years or up to 12 years. And the last 10% is an even split between the lighter rums and the sort of, they call this the mid-heavy, mid-light, aged between 2 and 12. So again, lots of different blending, lots of different ages. And the main difference between this one, the Selection de Familia, and the Reserva Exclusiva, which is which is the one that everyone knows in Diplomatica. It comes in the green bottle. It's beautiful. Is this one they use a lot different. They use different casks for the maturation. So they usually use ex-bourbon casks. They use brand new American oak casks. They use ex-Scotch single malt whiskey casks in this, as well as the Selection de Familia. But the Selection de Familia, they also use sherry casks. See, there's that big link between Spain and the colonies. Some of the Ballesteros family actually live in Jerez, and they go there a couple of times a year. So John, who used to look after Diplomatico, is a massive sherry fan, so he used to love doing sherry pairings, which I'm looking forward to doing soon as possible. So you get extra layers of complexity in this one. So you've got those sort of those red berries. You've got those beautiful sort of nutty notes, that sort of dry nutty notes from it too.
With all those stills and then also all those cask types as well that they get to play with, they guess I've got a huge palette in order to play about with all those kind of like different rums that they can create as well.
Yeah, it's great. They've had to build some new aging warehouses recently, so I think they've got 22 aging warehouses. I know it's about 300,000 casks aging at one time. So the Selection de Familia, because they're with the Reserva Exclusiva in the green bottle, is in about 95 different countries. As it gets bigger, they wanted to sort of start producing something else that's a little bit more niche for the original fans, the original supporters of Diplomatico. So this one's only available at independent retailers like Starmer Boss, and sort of you'll find it at sort of independent bars and things as well. So it's giving back to the original fans and the original supporters, this one.
And I've seen that. I mean, I absolutely adore. I mean, Diplomatico is one of our best-selling rums, and I think the Reserva Exclusiva is probably the most decorated rum in the world as well. And for me, this is like a little step up from the Reserva Exclusiva. It's a little bit like, well, you kind of got used to that comfy sofa that is the Reserva Exclusiva, and this is now something a little bit more debonair, a little bit more, I guess, appealing to perhaps people who are really into maybe whiskey as well. It's got a little bit more, it's a little bit more reserved, and I guess a little bit less flamboyant, but beautifully structured as well. So we sell quite a lot of the Res X, and this is we've now been grading people up to the this particular the familiar one, and it's so delicious. It's true that in Venezuela you've got to age the rum for a minimum of 2 years. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. So each island will have different rules and regulations. Obviously, Haiti don't have to age your rum. Barbados, you don't either. Barbados or Jamaica, but the likes of Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Venezuela, they have. Venezuela has a DOC, so a denomination of origin. So they have to age their rums for a minimum of 2 years. They have to use 100% Venezuelan sugarcane. Mm-hmm. They use molasses and sugarcane honey. So sugarcane honey, it's a term that gets thrown around in sort of Central American countries and Central South American. basically once you get your sugarcane juice, you start to boil it down in the sort of the pans, and then you centrifuge it once to remove a certain level of sugar, and then that's it. So it's still very, very high sugar content, so about 60, 70%. Then we use molasses, which means it's gone through that process once more or twice more. So you're essentially, refining it a little bit more. But once you've got a higher sugar content, we leave it for a longer fermentation, so you eventually get more aromatics and more flavor coming through as well. So we use a combination of the two. And this is 95% sugarcane honey. And it's worth noting as well, Venezuela, because of their DOC, they're allowed to add sugar into their rums. And in Venezuela, it's very popular, apparently, because when we asked Nelson, who's another one of our Raneros, maestros, and they said, Diplomatica do sweeten their rums a bit. It was like, wow, it was like, that's the way we like drinking it. Ever been to Venezuela? I can't contest that. So you're like, yeah, absolutely. But this one is a lot drier, deliberately is a lot drier. It's a exclusive.
Yes, a more sophisticated kind of grown-up version of Reserve Exclusiva, but you still have that trait between all of the Diplomatico kind of families. And I guess you know, for us as a retail point as well, it's a little bit more expensive than Res X, but less than the vintage ones as well, which are which are also incredible rums as well.
They are fantastic, yeah. You have to. This is the first time really we're trying an fully aged product. It's a lot hotter in the Caribbean as well, so you get a lot more impact on the casks a lot quicker. Like Venezuela, you're looking around 26 to 32 to 34 degrees all year round. They're very, very high humidity as well. So heat is a catalyst, so you get a lot more interaction with the casks, a lot more flavor extraction, and you also get a lot of thirsty angels knocking around as well. So I think after about 10 years, we lose about 50 to 60% of our casks.
Wow, that's a huge amount.
Huge amount. But then that's mostly water evaporating, so it's mostly just concentration of flavor. That's the way I like it.
So the rums get stronger in the cask as opposed to, like, I guess in Scotland, where it's the alcohol that's evaporating, so they get.
Well, it will go down slightly, but not quite as much, because it is hot and humid as well. So we tend to age our pot still rums at 55% anyway, so very, very low. So by the time they come out, they're in the late 40s, because we have to bottle between 40 and 50% as well in Venezuela. That's kind of the rules. So you'll never find someone doing a cheeky 37.5, but you will never find an overproof either. So the strongest we've bottled at is 47, which is the Planas, and the distillery collection as well.
Yeah, the Planas is exceptional as well, and again, that's a really flavoursome rum. That's, again, as you said earlier, it's a white rum, but it doesn't taste as you would expect a white rum to taste like. It's stunning stuff.
Yeah, they've changed people's preconceptions, because sometimes I now, whenever I do a tasting for Diplomatico, I put the white rum second, just it confuses people, because people assume it's going to be the cheaper one, the younger one, and it's not the case whatsoever. So it's good. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I know some of you might find. I hope you enjoyed the Clarence. I absolutely love it. But this is something I think a bit more familiar, but beautifully made, and with those extra sherry cask finishes, you've got those extra layers of complexity, and shows you, again, just between three of the 6 rums we've tried, how they all are.
Exactly. I mean, you compare these two together, and they are, completely worlds apart, but both in the category of rum, but again, completely very, very different sort of styles as well. But yeah, that's actually super delicious, and we're super privileged to be able to actually have this and sell it in the store. Really, really pleased about that.
Thank you for doing so as well. You're really good to us. Thank you.
big fans of Diplomatica. But yeah, that's stunning. And then you get those kind of bits that you always expect from rum. Those vanillas, those red fruits, and then as you say, it's got that richness on the palate, and then just that complexity as well. After a very hard day at work, you can see you just easily finishing that.
Yeah, it's quite dangerous actually.
It is very dangerous.
Sam, who is our rep and works very closely with Jeff, I did a tasting with him. I don't think it was even for a customer. I think he was just like, "Oh, it's going down quickly."
Yeah, pretty dangerous.
Yeah, it's delicious.
A question we get asked reasonably frequently: the picture of the guy on the front.
Yeah, I get asked that quite a lot. Is a chap called Don Juancho, and kind of he's again, the legend has it. He was a bit of a local lad. I don't think they'd call him a lad over there. They called him Antoine, which is a nobleman. And the way I've sort of heard him described as, he was very much of a Great Gatsby kind of character in the local area. There's a village called the town's called La Miel, where it's made. It's about 3 to 6 hours, depending on traffic and roads outside of Caracas. And he used to travel the world and find new expensive spirits and basically host lots of parties. He was the ultimate host, the ultimate gentleman, and used to explore and share his things. Very much like I like to describe as a Great Gatsby character. Throw a good party with good spirits and cigars.
Nice. Immortalized on the front of Diplomatica. So
yeah. So when we had a call with Jose Senior, he actually had like a big bust of him behind him, like a sort of like 2.5 foot. So he is immortalized in more than one way. Distillery.
Oh yeah, fantastic. So where's the next stop?
Now we're going to go to Jamaica, and then we're going to go to Hampton Estate in Jamaica before we go off to Blacktop, the blends, and then we go back to Barbados.
So up to Hampton.
Hampton is a beautiful, very considering this distillery itself has been around since the 1750s. They only released their first rums at the tail end of 2018. Before that, they were just making rum solely for blending and didn't age their stock at all. So if you saw a Hampton or a bottle with Hampton on it and it was aged, it was either an independent bottler like Berry Brothers, Caden Head, or that kind of ilk. They'd never actually released their rums themselves, which is until 2018. And they're already getting a big name for themselves already, considering they've only been releasing for like one of the years they haven't been able to get out and see anyone about it. But it's so it's going well. But it's a very unique distillery. Again, I'll show you some pics now. Also going to turn the light on because I'm sat in the dark now.
Yeah. And why has it taken them so long to get around to releasing it themselves? I guess if they're contract distilling for other people.
So there used to be. I'll talk about it more when we get to Blacktop, but the sort of rum distilleries having their own brands is a relatively new thing. Mm-hmm. The distilleries would make rum under contract and would sell it to European blenders, because back in the day it was a very colonial way of looking at things. Like the colonies would make the products and then you'd refine them in Europe. Essentially, that was the kind of attitude for a very, very long time with sort of producers. So you'd have the big major docks in the UK would be like Glasgow, Liverpool, Bristol, and then Plymouth, and eventually the London docks as well. But you've got a big blending house and a big broker still in Amsterdam called E&A Shear, probably a company you've never heard of. They're hundreds of years old. They have some of the biggest rum reserves in Europe, and they basically have a contract with most distillers all across the world. And if you want to have a brand, you'd go to them and they'd blend it for you. So you'd have like Duppy Share, for example. Great rum. George doesn't have a distillery. He's not from the Caribbean, the guy that owns it. So he wanted to produce a rum of a certain style that he really enjoyed. So he would go there, for example, and you'd get them to make it. So Hampton they would sell 100% of their rums still to Europe, essentially, to these European blenders, where the rum would be used because it was so punchy and flavorful. We'll get to why in a second. It would be used in different blends. It would be used in confectionery, like rum and raisin ice cream and things like that. Boiled sweets. Chanel are apparently a customer as well. They use it in their perfumes. Hamden number 5.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, a lot of rum was exported completely unaged, and then the late 1800s, or the middle of the 1800s, you saw Don Facundo Bacardi move over, and he started releasing his as Bacardi, and you started seeing distilleries and blenders actually pop up on the islands. That's where Foursquare started. So late 1800s, the Seal family didn't own a distillery, but they would buy rums and blend it and release theirs on the island. And then eventually you start to export it. Like Appleton didn't start to make their own Appleton rums since the 60s and 70s. El Dorado, for example, didn't start making their own rums until the 90s. And Diplomatico didn't start releasing theirs globally. Well, they didn't start exporting it until 2006. So it's a relatively new thing. Blenders were kings, essentially, much like whiskey. Single malts are a relatively new thing compared to blended malts as well. That's the long answer. Sorry.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, so we're going to hop over to Jamaica, which is here. Used to be part of the Spanish sort of home sort of stronghold. So all of the bigger islands called the Greater Antilles used to be Spanish, and then all of these are called the Lesser Antilles, the kind of French, Spanish, French, a little bit Spanish, British, and Dutch, Portuguese example. The British basically tried to conquer Hispaniola when it was all one island, all one country, and failed, and then took Jamaica because it was not very fortified. And essentially back in the day when there was privateers and pirates, the British Navy used to do it to just ransack the Spanish ships that were bringing all the gold across to Europe. So it was well positioned there. And they basically turned it into a big sort of sugar stronghold as well. So, and Jamaican rum is always seen as being big, bold, full of integrity, and very, very tropical flavor. And always, hopefully, always will be. So much like Barbados, there used to be hundreds of plantations, hundreds of distilleries. Now there's only 6. Worthy Park only started redistilling in 2005. I want to say 2005? Yeah. But Hamden has been going ever since. So you've got Appleton Estate, which is probably the most famous one. This little one here, I haven't put the name on it. It's called New Yarmouth. It's a secret one. I don't know anyone that's ever been there. But it's owned by Appleton Estate and Ray Nephew. But we've got Hamden up here in the north, in a region called Trelawney. So you would think it's called Trelawney, like it down in Cornwall, but I got schooled by an old Jamaican lady whilst I was there, and it's Trelawney. So it's a beautiful distillery, very, very old, very, very old school. As I say, it's been there since the 1700s. This is one of their old stills they've got out the front. And they haven't changed their methods at all. So it's always been family owned. So it was owned by a Scottish family in the 1750s. And then in the 1850s, another family called the Lawson family took over. And then they developed this method, which was dubbed the Trelawney method, which is still used today and was adopted by other people in that region. Basically, an extended fermentation and a way of making rum so funky, fruity, and aromatic, it became sort of legendary of that region. And there's only Hamden and Long Pond that only use that methods today. So I'll kind of talk you through. Again, it's a very old school, very, very traditional way of doing things. So here they use, again, a natural fermentation. So low and slow, essentially. So in 2009, a new family bought it called the Hussey family. So you had the Harris and Husseys. They bought the distillery and they changed nothing. You would have thought they might have modernized some things, but they loved the distillery. And the one thing they did change was they actually started aging stock. But you can't change these. So these aging warehouses, some of these vats are up to 100 years old. You can't just go in with like an airbrush or a sort of a high pressure steamer, because you'd get away, you'd burst away like lots of different yeast cultures and things that have cultivated there over the many centuries. It's not. There's a reason the picture's small. It's not the most glamorous picture, but they leave their molasses there for about anywhere from 8 days up to 3 weeks to ferment. So you get all these natural yeasts that grow on everything. They're airborne. They'll grow the palm trees down the road. They're embedded in the vats. They will have each different yeast will basically produce a different flavor. And the longer you leave that, the more those flavors tend to evolve. The longer you leave it, the more bacteria sets in, the more acidic it becomes. And then when acids react with alcohols, they produce what's called esters, which are like big fruity aromatics. So the ester that's in bananas, you'll find in this, for example. So esters give all fruits and flowers their throat. It's like the chemical that gives them all their aromas. So the longer you leave this, it produces a hugely aromatic, funky wash. And this little channel here is lovely known as the muck pit, or the mock pit, as the Jamaicans say, which sounds a lot better than muck, the mock pit, which, like many of my friends, some of you must have made a sourdough over lockdown last year. This is essentially your starter, the mother dough, which is centuries and centuries of years old. So all of some of the waste and some of the products from the different vats gets popped in here. It's kind of like an evolution. It's kind of like as I say, the mother dough if you're making a sourdough bread or sour pizza bread or something like that. They also use sugarcane juice, which they turn into a vinegar via double fermentation. So it's super acidic. And then they blend it all together. And then they also use this, which is dunder, which is left over in the still from previous distillations. So it's not just we take molasses, ferment it. It's a very complex way of doing things. And then they use 100% pot stills. They use natural fermentation. They use natural spring water, which is from a dam down the road, which they built in the 1850s. They actually built a dam to hold the spring water. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the first time it's tropically aged as well. So everything is done the old school way. Here's some of the pot stills as well. They've actually got 5 of these now. And I said, if any of you are interested, I'll run you through what these little things are. Mm-hmm. If you've been to distilleries in Scotland or Ireland or traditional pot stills, it would usually just be this part, traditional pot. But in Scotland, they have to do, once they've got their fermented sort of wash, they'll distill it once and they call that the wash run, and then they have to do it again to make it sort of to spirit still as well. So you kind of have 2 different distillations. These are basically just like mini little stills. So we'll load this up with what's called the low wine, which are like when you produce a spirit, you'll get different aromatics and different alcohols coming off first. And first of all, it's called the heads. They don't taste very nice, so you'll cut them. Then you keep the hearts, which is the good part. And then slowly you'll start getting the tails, those heavier alcohols that you don't really want to get flavor-wise. But they still have loads and loads of flavor. So we keep them and load them up in these. And basically you can just do a 1 distillation run in one go. So it comes up, say, 40, 60, and 80, whilst maintaining a high level of all the flavors that you wanted to keep it in. Technically, you could just I've seen loads of diagrams when people were first sort of creating these. You could put like 6 of them in a row. Produce a high ABV spirit, but again, it's not very economical, which is why they decided to make columns instead. So you'll find all of these. So Diplomatica have these, Foursquare have these. Most columns outside of Haiti, hot pot still, sorry, would have these. We've got 4 of them. The one down the end is called the elephant, for obvious reasons.
They look similar, but they look a little bit different as well. Like the arms that go over look at slightly different angles, but
yeah. So they're all from different producers actually. So over the years, so the one at the back's of John Doerr from the 1960s, which is a Scottish producer. This is a TNT, which is from South Africa. That was brought in the 90s. This is a Forsyths, again from Scotland. Mm-hmm. I think they've just got another Forsyths, and they have one a Vendôme, which is a American still producer. So they've got different stills from different producers over the years as they've needed to either 1, replace them, or 2, up their production. Yeah. So originally they did release it didn't have an age statement, but it was a 7 to 8 year old. Now this one is the 8-year-old. that we've got now. So this is it says pure single rum because it is 100% pot still rum.
And I really like the fact that on the bottle that you've got all the information as well on there. It tells you all about.
It is the nerdiest label ever. It's fantastic.
I love it. I love that so much. But it has like the wild fermentation, pot still, spring water, natural color, no added sugar, high ester, fully matured in the tropics. So this is a rum that really can only be made at Hampden. I mean, if it's got all those individual components such as the spring water, those natural yeasts which are going to be site specific as well, tropical aging. There's nowhere else on the planet you can't replicate this in any way, shape, or form.
No, not at all. I've tried some of the independent bottlings of Hampden that have been aged in Europe, and they have some similarities. Obviously, they have that high ester, but they're completely different. They're poles apart. You wouldn't be able to make this anywhere, even age it somewhere else to taste it, let alone try and make it.
And it's that long fermentation that's then building up all those flavors as well, and it's creating that. And I guess if they Hampden, some of their clients are things like the perfume industry. They can make I guess rums with lots and lots of like elements in them, lots of like flavors in them as well. Lots of
so they actually make 8 different rums, which are all different ratios of those raw ingredients. So the molasses, the dunder, the muck, and the sugarcane juice, and in different intensities of flavor.
Wow.
which are measured like peated whiskies at ppm. We do esters per grams per hectoliter, essentially. And some of our they can make funky, basically, like something you'd try today and still be tasting tomorrow. That kind of those ones are for blending, which is why Hampden was so good. Which is why Hampden was respected so much, because it was like if you were making a rum blend, you'd be like, needs more Hampden. You'd just be like dash dash. And you're like, oh, that's better. It's like a Jamaica cordial, essentially, like their higher risk ones.
Yeah, it's just like the bit brings everything together, just adds those bits on there. And again, that's very different to all the other rums that we've had before. But yeah, absolutely amazing, big and bold and rich. But
I get like lots of like black tea, lots of allspice coming from the oak aging as well. You do get that hints of like overripe. When there's a term they use, funky, it's basically like things that taste good that you wouldn't expect to, like like overripe bananas or like pineapples on the turn. But that's what things do.
And a little bit like burnt bananas as well, I guess. If you're a whiskey drinker and you like the whiskies of like Islay, you like those kind of peaty sort of style whiskies, then something like Hampden, you're going to be really intrigued. You're going to be really, really into, because it's got that kind of like that big high ester, big weighty kind of element as well to it. Stunning, really, really good, really, really good.
You take this to more whiskey shows than we do rum shows. Yeah, people tend to enjoy it. It's quite enjoyed taking Hampden Estate to Hampden Park up in Scotland.
That's pretty cool. And then of the other sort of Jamaican distilleries, I guess, so you're saying that these are going to be like the biggest and the boldest as well. Is there any sort of like connection between them? Because is it true that Jamaica have tried to create their own DOM, their own origin?
They had in the paperwork for making a geographical indicator. There's a bit of beef as well on the island. We can go into that as well, and Barbados. So much like Blue Mountain coffee, it comes from Jamaica. It's processed so your end customer knows it's of a certain quality and it's from the same place. Basically, the rums want to do that as well. That if it's made in Jamaica, it's aged in Jamaica, you got that fully Jamaica stamp of approval, which means like no added sugar for that product of Jamaica, like 40%, and lots of different productions basically. So they've been stuck by that. No one's contested that as far until recently. So in Barbados, they're trying to do the same, because there's other rums that are potentially made under contract in Barbados, then have a world of sugar and then a 37.5% load of colouring, and then it says products of Barbados, and you're like, is it? Like, it's like taking champagne grapes and then making it in Spain and then calling it a champagne. Like, there's people they would not be happy. But in Barbados, they were trying to put together a geographical indicator. So they had a draft ready. All 4 distilleries agreed. The Barbados government were about to sign it all off. And then one of the distilleries got bought out by another brand, a French company, and they contested lots of things. So basically, it's a big... With that acquisition, they actually bought shares of a third of a distillery in Jamaica. So they're doing the same in Jamaica. So again, it's all kicking off.
Well, I guess the thing about, when you age rum in the country, there's that thing that you have with whiskey as well. You make whiskey on there's a big thing about Isla whiskey as well, and Bruichladdich are very big about it. All their whiskey is actually aged on the Isle of Islay, and that's kind of what you're buying into. Whereas other distilleries, it'll be made, and the process is perhaps a week for fermentation, distillation, and then it's aged on the mainland for 12 years. It's the majority of its life is made somewhere else. And I can fully understand that if you want to buy a Jamaican rum or a Barbados rum, then perhaps it should be also aged in the country where it comes from as well,
or at least stated on the bottle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of only fair, really, isn't it?
Because the rum's a lot of producers are trying to get away from that sort of rum is the Wild West. Like, it's not. Like, a lot of people would just say, if someone comes in and says, "Oh, it's a blend of Caribbean rums," you're like, well, there's like 30 different countries, departments of different other nations. There's lots of different cultures. You're like, just because it's a region, you can't just call it. It's like saying European whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have Scottish whiskey that has its own rules, Irish as well.
Exactly.
English. So just to call it Caribbean rum is I guess, you're right. Yeah, you wouldn't call it European whiskey. But this is incredible. Big, bold, and then so much flavour as well. Let's say you get a little bit of tea, spice on there, burnt bananas. Fantastic.
I love it. That with if you just a simple sort of like just some pineapple juice, bit of lime and ginger beer, works really, really. Stirred down in an old fashioned, just some bitters and sugar. Stir. I think one of the leaflets I got given recently is to make a rum cake. So basically, it's just like make a sponge cake and then make a Hampden glaze with loads of butter and sugar.
That's delicious. That's really, really good.
Big fan.
So Hampden plays quite a pivotal role, and I guess because its clients have been from the perfume industry in rum and raisin ice cream. Somewhere along the line, pretty much everyone has had a little taste of Hampden, probably somewhere at some point.
Yeah, so a lot of people are like, it tastes familiar. When we watched it, it should be. Yeah.
You've had rum and raisin ice cream. It's probably
and it's an integral part in lots of people's blends as well. Not black top, but in a similar fashion.
So black top is the next one that we're generally having a little look at.
Yeah, so black top is a traditional blend of different islands, which includes Jamaica as well. Again, this is relatively new. This was 2019. This was launched.
Guest named after the Black Top Day, the Black Top tradition of giving a rum to the sailors in the Navy.
Exactly that. Yes. So, I'll show you a couple more slides so you don't have to stare at my face. Here we go. Got this down now. So as I mentioned earlier about Hamden, this used to be like sort of the old school way of rum being produced. So the distilleries would produce the rum. They were shipped back and traded in Europe, where they were aged at the likes of the London docks. So down in West India Quay, sorry, that was the sugar warehouses and the rum warehouses. There's a right by Canary Wharf. So there used to be some like millions of casks of rum coming in from the West Indies and being aged and blended there. So that was built, I think that was built in like 1804, sort of 1802 kind of way. And huge ships that queue up along the Thames waiting to unload. And then you started seeing people producing their own blends. So Lemonheart was actually a German chap down in Cornwall called something Lehman. I can't think of his first name. The likes of Alfred Lamb. He was a British chap who would buy rums from Guyana, which would have been shipped back, and then he would aged and blended them in England as well. The likes of Woods, many brands, Bristol Rums, for example, as well. Perhaps you'd see different brands popping up. And the British Navy also had a huge amounts of rums coming in. Then they actually built their own naval docks in Deptford, so they don't have to get their rum stuck in the queue, essentially. So, the British Navy did a great job of, one, drinking lots of rum, and two, promoting it and sailing it around the world. So if you're a sailor, it was pretty bad time, but so the 1600s, or even before then, it was pretty rough time at sea. They didn't have uniforms. Sometimes you just found yourself one day in the Navy on a boat after a big night out. That'd be terrible. That's a terrible hangover that is. Somewhere outside the Atlantic, in the Atlantic. And you would always have water. Well, you'd have to have water, and water obviously would spoil. Everything was kept in big vats, whether it be bread, whether it be, I don't know, gunpowder, whether it be anything, old soggy oat biscuits. Everything was kept in wood vats, and obviously, if you keep water in an old unsanitary wooden vat or wooden barrel, it's going to go bad eventually. So they would keep beers. Again, beer would spoil eventually. That's why they created IPAs. It's heavily hopped and heavily flavoured and higher ABV, so it lasts a bit longer. So you'd always eventually have spirits as well, because one, it would take up wines. Madeira wines are very popular, and brandies. So it'd take up less space. But once you're dependent on where you are, obviously, if you're over in the Caribbean, the 1700s, there's not much brandy to be had. So you'd stop off for reserves and basically like re-up. I've been watching The Wire recently, and re-stash up everything. Your provisions, that's the word I should be looking for. And you would buy whatever spirits you could get from different islands. Soon that became, after Barbados and Jamaica making lots, and then Guyana following shortly, rum became that sort of favourable spirit. And eventually they the Admiralty said that rum would be, across the world, the preferred spirit of the British Navy. So they would buy different rums. At first it was at discretion, and then eventually the Admiralty set up this company teamed up with this company called Edie and Effman, who are still in, they still have an office actually by the Shard in London. I'm not sure what they trade now, but it's not rum. They used to buy rum under contract of the Admiralty from what was originally thought to be just the British nations. But since lots of new information's come and new research has been done, it's actually wherever they could get it in some cases if they were low. Bring it back to London, where they would blend it in their loyal docks, in their victualling yards. Some were down in Plymouth, one was down in Portsmouth, one was in London. We found evidence of some being in like Singapore and things like that as well. So they eventually were some all around the world. So there wasn't just one rum. So basically it was a rum mostly of Trinidad, Guyana, a bit of Barbados. Jamaica was actually not popular because it was too flavorful. And they would get half a pint per day per person as their daily ration. They soon realized that half a pint a day of what at the time would have been 57%-ish rum was a little bit too much. So eventually they reduced it, and they started, you'd have the top gradually got smaller and smaller and smaller, but they would add it with like a quarter gallon of water, lime and sugar, and produce something known as a grog. was named after a chap called Admiral Vernon, who was the guy whose idea it was. And he used to wear a big Grogham wax cloak. So they called him Old Grog, and therefore called the Grog, which again, rum, lime and sugar is similar to a daiquiri. They were basically drinking rum punch. So gradually over time, a lot of people petitioned against it because the rum was part of the payment actually. So you could turn down the rum and get paid extra, but it became part of life, so not many people did. It got lobbied against, and eventually in 1917, July 31st was the last day the tot was served, and it was dubbed Black Tot Day. So you can see the order in the first photograph at the top. This guy's called the purser. He was the guy that would sort of measure everything out and make sure everyone got theirs. And these guys would pick up like their gallon and then go share it with the rest of their team. This guy was called the purser or the pusser, which is what that Navy rum's named after. And this is obviously on Black Top Day, but things got a little less unruly. They saw off the rum in a good way. They had like military and naval funerals, gun salutes, and everything like that. But then you can see these little vats here. All of the rum there was millions and millions of gallons of rum, which had been blended in sort of London and Portsmouth. That got all put into these sort of 4.5 litre demijohns, which are then covered in this sort of wicker. And then they were kind of kept underneath the royal docks for the best part of 40 years. Until about 2010, 2009, our boss Sakinda, he started getting offered a couple to buy, and he was like, "Oh, that sounds interesting. I'll buy a couple." And then gradually, more and more people started like coming out of the earth, coming out of the woodwork with these flagons. So eventually, he bought as many as he could find and launched a brand called Black Tot, the Last Consignment, which is a blend of all of these different vessels that he got. And on the top of them and some of the wax seal, you can see the different years. Some are in like 1955, some are 65, some are 1970. Some are from different victualling yards, some have different stamps on them. It's all very exciting if you're a rum nerd. And we're still sort of finding out what we've got. That is about 650 quid, 700 quid a bottle, quite rare. Not really something you could drink every day. So they created this a couple of years ago, kind of like a homage to it. So they wanted to create their own blend, utilizing some of their favorite rums as well. So they went to Demerara Distillers in Guyana. So El Dorado's their brand. They were used to produce, if you look at some of the documents they've got, some up to 60%, up sometimes up to 80% of the blends over certain years were Guyanese rum. So they would use these big bold Demerara rums, quite licoricey, very smoky, quite heavy, delicious. So we used the bulk of this is 40% aged between 3 and 5 years actually in Guyana. We then use some unaged rum, which again is pot and column rum, which is completely unaged, blend in it, which is why it hasn't got an age statement. 35% because we really wanted that beautiful softness, the Barbados kind of creaminess, that good nice balance, those sort of nice tropical fruits, coconut vanillins. And then even though the Royal Navy turned Jamaican rum away, I think they were a bit desperate during the Second World War, so Jamaica managed to get back in the blend. We like Jamaican rum, so it's something similar. It's not Hamden, but it's something similar. And then because they're whiskey producers, they blend everything in Scotland. It's all aged in the Caribbean. We get it through E&A Shears, that broker I was telling you about in Amsterdam. And then we bring it up and blend everything in Scotland. And then because they're predominantly whiskey makers, it's non-chill filtered and there's no sugar to it. And it's 46%. Is the kind of flavor profile you get, I think.
Let's have a taste.
Yeah, there's been so much new information sort of unearthed by people going to the National Archives and things like that, rooting through and watching lots of old videos from the like proper old school BBC, where it's like hello, 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 those kind of voices. Little videos about how they make the rum is fascinating.
Wow, that's really, really slim. And again, that's you get that kind of like dark chocolate, that kind of treacle, elements on there, quite rich and quite creamy on the palate as well. Yeah, that's super delicious.
Yeah, it's nice and chocolatey. You've got those sort of like Demerara rum. Demerara rum gets the name from the county and the river, which is where the sugar gets its name from as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that tends to be quite licoricey, quite chewy, lots of like plums and prunes and chocolatey, and it's kind of like dates and figs. And then you do get that little bit of Jamaican funkiness, those kind of bananas and overripe fruit right on the end.
You do, yeah. I was just about to say, you get that rich kind of fruit, and then just as it kind of finishes, as it tails off, it gives that gives it an extra kind of length right at the end of it, which is really, really delicious. We did a black tot tasting, I think, last year, which was really, really fascinating. Which, if you are interested, it's still on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and watch it, where they had all the different components. And luckily, we found one here.
Oh, you got one still, yes.
Got one, which I didn't know we had. I think we've only maybe got one or two left. But it actually had all the different components. So you could drink the Barbados, the Jamaican, the Guyana, and then the final blend. And then this little beautiful little thing, which is the
50th
anniversary, which was great. So if you are interested in black tot and a little bit more about this particular, all the individual components, go seek it out on our channel here. But yes, stunning rum, and it'd be great to. I mean, fascinating that there's still these original bits of Navy rum that still exist that are kicking around as well. I mean,
yeah,
£800, £700 a lot of money, but it's a bit of history.
Yeah, the flagons, they actually arrived. There's so much sort of sawdust. They come in these huge wooden, almost like they kind of look like that end scene of Indiana Jones, where when he kind of goes into that warehouse and it's just like stacks full of these wooden boxes, really thick, and you have to get a crowbar to open them. That's the kind of box they're in. They're full of sawdust, and then somewhere in them, there's only two. You can kind of see they're only designed to go one way. They were not coming back. And yeah, we've still got some of them as well. And it's fascinating. Again, they're being as transparent and as open as possible, because that's the way we're kind of moving in the rum world. No kind of smokes, and it's not aged above the stars or filtered through quartz or anything like that. And it's kind of like, this is how it's made. It's trying to get, speak a language that whiskey drinkers have been using for a long time. So that's why they're quite open to share you their recipe as well. So I don't think anyone's going to make Black Top 2.0. They'll always want to try and change it anyway. There's a great story with the 50th anniversary, quickly. Because they couldn't get up to the aging warehouses, they bought lots of different casks, some really, really rare, some from Asian Europe, some over in Scotland. Basically, spent a long time picking up these casks. And then usually the blender Ollie would go up and do the blending, but because of circumstances, he couldn't. So basically, if they got back their samples, they were like, that's very Jamaica heavy. There's a lot of Hamden in that. And I think they were supposed to put a third or half a cask of Hamden in. They put the whole thing in. So so they had to beg, borrow, and buy, and ended up producing an extra third of the amount of rum. And now they've kept the extra third, and they're going to create their own black top evolutionary blend every year, like the Navy did, which is quite cool. Happy hour.
Serendipity at play. Yeah. But what's great about Black Top is you can really taste, like, from the Veritas where we started, and then going through to things like the Hamden. You can taste those individual components, and hopefully, people from the tasting now will be able to start picking out when they come to a rum blend like Black Top, those are the kind of Jamaican elements, those Barbados elements that are coming through as well. But yeah, that's stunning.
Yeah, we're really happy with that as well. Yeah, it's nowhere near £600-700. You'd be happy to.
And in that kind of sort of style of like that Navy sort of tradition as well, which is really delicious.
Yeah, I just got given a miniature actually, and they have this exactly the same.
That's so cute. That's yeah, they're fantastic and all amazing, amazing rums, really. But we've got something special to finish on, which I am incredibly excited about. We're very, very lucky, very honoured to have this particular bottle. And I can imagine there's not particularly much of this about. So I guess we started on Barbados and we're going to finish at Barbados.
Yeah, we've come full circle. So the last was Habitation Vellier is the name. You'll not be able to see on my screen. Yeah. So Habitation Vellier is the brand name. And Luca, the chap who I showed you earlier, the Italian guy, he's been traveling the Caribbean for the last 40, 30 years, discovering new islands, again, promoting transparency and create works to bring lots of different rum brands to the UK, or Europe first, and then eventually the UK, like Clarence, like Hamden, and this is his passion project. So pot still rums, those heavy style of rums, they're becoming rare. Well, were becoming rarer and rarer, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of people going for that lighter sort of style. So he wanted to create a brand that's focused solely on the pot still rums, essentially. So he's got great relationships with most distilleries in the Caribbean. So he's managed to dig out some great liquid that would never usually be released. So this one that we're trying, it's called Last Ward. I'll explain in that in a second, but it's actually from Mount Gay. So Mount Gay recently have released a pot still rum, but before that, they had never done it before. And it's got a really, really nice story behind it. So we've got Mount Gay right up the top. They have a visitor centre down Bridgetown down here, which you can visit as well. But here we go. So this is the bottle, and it's nerdy as. So Luca wanted to give you all of the information you could have, and it's supposed to look like a little medicine bottle, like a really sort of scientific. So on the label, it gives you, can you zoom in a little bit? Yeah, there you go. Very, very rare. So you've got a picture of the pot still, because Mount Gay uses pot on column still traditionally. So you wanted to give you everything, all the information. So when it's distilled, when it's bottled, how old it is, 65% Angels share, where it's distilled. Again, he likes to celebrate. Oh dear, the wrong way. There we go. He likes to celebrate the distillery and then just have his brand name at the bottom, because he hasn't made this rum. He's just worked with them to release it. So this is a very, very rare pot still only. This is the pot still part that goes into Mount Gay. So Mount Gay, as I mentioned, make blends. The reason why it's called the Last Ward is because the Ward family owned the distillery. This is quite interesting. I find it interesting. Anyway, the Ward family has owned the Mount Gay distillery for the best part since the beginning of the 1900s. So it was always in their family. And then Frank Ward, he was the last of the family owning it, and the distillery and the Mount Gay brand now is owned by Remy Cointreau. I think in the 90s, Remy Cointreau bought the brand name and the aging warehouses. So there was a little pipe from the distillery that went into the aging warehouses and the blending, and the distillery was kept separate. So Frank Ward still owned the distillery, but not the Mount Gay brand, and he would make the rum for the Mount Gay, and Mount Gay would do their own blending and have their own brand separately. So he would use his pot stills to make his own brand called Mount Gilboa, Gilboa, which is another mount, not mountain, just a little hill down the road, and that would be a pot still only, about 4-year-old rum. He'd sell in Barbados only. You can still find some on auctions and things like that. And then later on, in 2014, the distillery was bought completely by Remy Cointreau, which obviously stopped him using all these stills. So he had all these different aged stocks from 2007. So Luca bought them at the time. I think there was 19 casks. And he released this, and he called it, because it's the last word of Frank Ward. That's why it's called the Last Ward. Mount Gay wouldn't let us use their name because it's not their official release. So it's very rare. You won't try this. Mount Gay have since released their own pot still rum, think it was off the success of this one, but I won't say that. that's not official. But again, it's full strength, no sugar, 59% ABV, really, really rare, like a really, really rare example, like a very traditional Barbados rum. This is like what gives the sort of the heavier, weightier flavors of Mount Gay.
And most Barbados rum now is going to be a combination of both pot and column, like you say, like Foursquare, like WIRD. And so, and I guess the Mount Gay brand as well. And that lightness from the column, giving that like pressure sort of style to the weightiness of the pot. But this is stunning, and it's literally like an element of that rum, but then extracted, and you can actually taste this as an element of the rum just on its own, really, which is fascinating. And this has been aged for 10 years. In
10 years.
Well.
And with 65% angel share, so 65% has evaporated over those 10 years, which is mad. The reason why people do have pot and column is because Mount Gay have a beautiful range. They have from the Eclipse, and as things get older, the pot still runs because they're heavy and weighty. They actually stand up and evolve better whilst you're aging them. So as they get older, they'll put gradually more and more of the pot still in, so make it a bit deeper, a bit more richer, and a bit more complex as the releases get older. And this is just 100% of that, which is super rare. I love this. I was so happy we did this. We chose this.
Yeah, totally.
Yes, Jeff, let's do this one.
And I guess, again, this is in the same way as, we're very fortunate to have been trying the Clarence, which is like a snapshot of something that's kind of like very current, but on a very tiny little sort of small scale. So a very, again, I guess, quite a rare rum from the Clarence Azure, in that, this is kind of like, made on the roadside or up in the hills, quite hard to get hold of. This is like almost like an echo from the past, really, in the fact that, this is something that will never be replicated again. It will never be, especially from, when Frank's tenureship of the distillery, you're never going to be able to drink it. So liquid history, essentially.
Exactly. And from such a well-established brand as well, something you won't try to feel a real sort of rare snapshot of what they do or have done.
Very, very stunning. When I was in Barbados, I was hoping to go and see the distillery at Mount Gay, and the week that I got there, the week before, when I went to go see my friends up in St Nicholas Abbey, they were like, the distillery's closed. Like, it was then that changeover period. So I missed getting to go see that distillery, unfortunately, by about a week. Frank Ward was on LinkedIn, and so I did message him on LinkedIn. I was just like, I wonder if I'm going to be able to get this. But it didn't happen. Went to the distillery, and there was the chains, unfortunately, all up, and they had been closed that week. Missed out on that one. I did manage to pick up though a couple of bottles of Mount Gilboa, but white rum at the airport. Which subsequently I drank, and so don't have them anymore. But
enjoyed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But that was and like you say, it's one of the brands that Frank, I think, himself tried to create and get some traction with before selling the distillery. But yeah, really hard and quite rare bottles to actually see. If you do see one in the wild, I've not seen one for like a good 6, 7, 8 years, but this is the only way now to drink that sort of like snapshot in time, really.
Yeah, Frank's legacy. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a big name actually. He was the head of WESPA, which is like the West Indies, kind of like a big group of rum producers that kind of get together. Big, like really good historian. Blacktop did a lot of online discussions and sort of seminars, and Frank, just his knowledge of sort of production and history and different styles, and he's very calm, very collected, very cool guy. You could listen to him for hours. Sadly, it was only an hour session, but you could tell he could have. You could sit there with a rum in hand and just listen to him talk. It was amazing.
yeah, having that knowledge of all that production for years, man, yeah, it must be fascinating to listen to that. Definitely, count me in.
Yeah, well, an incentive to go back and go visit Mount Gay and go visit.
Well, fingers crossed. I will be, hopefully, when lockdown is restricted, hopefully back there maybe next year. So start planning.
Nice.
That's the plan for me. But yeah, it's a country that I've visited a couple of times. Very, very fortunate to have like friends and people out there. So yeah, it's great. So always get to go visit the distilleries as well. That's the last one to tick off. Maybe see if I can get to see WIRD as well. But, I know they're right down by the beach as well. But that's for next year, when we can be back in the world again.
It's good to have plans in the diary, though, especially that.
Yeah, definitely. Got to have something. I've not done anything for a while. But yeah, drinking the rum in the place will always make a big difference as well. Stunning, absolutely. I mean, thank you very much for letting us try.
No, thank you.
Yeah, so a beautiful and amazing rum to finish on as well. Fantastic. So yeah, I guess that kind of wraps it up for our little tour of the Caribbean. If there were any questions from you guys out there, or if you're watching the show later on, you're not watching it live, you can always email them across to us. If there's anything you want to know, we can always get those questions sent over to Dean, and we can always reply to those as well. I hope you guys have really enjoyed tasting some amazing rums and seeing the big difference in styles stylistically between all the rums that are out there. There's a whole world of amazing rums to go in and explore as well. We stock all of these. I'm out of this just today. It's back in tomorrow, out of Veritas. I'm sorry. But yeah, they are all available in the store and on our website as well. We've got a small element of the last ward as well. So if you were interested in that, it's not a cheap bottle. That's £125 a bottle. But yeah, we do have a little bit of that and some other bits from Bellier as well. If you're interested, always come see me. I'm always really keen to talk about rum as well. Amazing selection. So thank you, Dean. Anything that you'd like to add before we call it an evening?
Not really. I just hope that it kind of opened some people's eyes, and hopefully you found something you wouldn't expect to have enjoyed, perhaps. And thank you. Yeah, I'll say I don't often get to dig out the last word, so thank you very much.
No, that's it's an amazing dram. You don't call rums drams, do you? But maybe you do.
Tots.
Yeah, it's an amazing drink. And it's such a privilege to be able to taste all this complete range. So yeah, that kind of I guess wraps it up. We do have on our website a little offer on Diplomatica at the moment. We're running a little promotion. So if you're for the Planas, the Reserva Exclusiva, and also the Mantuano, so we've got a little offer running on that for the next month as well. So have a little look on our website of that. And we're back on our YouTube channel with Tequila versus Mezcal. So that's Thursday, the 27th of May. That's going to be a fascinating session. I'm assuming Gabby's going to be joining us for that one, showing the diversity and the regionality of tequila and mezcal. And then we've also got on the 24th of June, so our June tasting is entitled Let's Get Tropical, which will be a foray into looking at how the tropics can change the maturation of spirits. Not exactly sure what we've got lined up for that, but it's going to be amazing. It's going to be really good. So yeah, we can't wait for those. All of those events are available, like I say, on our website. So yeah, it just leaves me at this point to say thank you, Dean. Thank you very much for joining us and taking us through this incredible selection. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Oh, fantastic. And the usual YouTube stuff, if you've enjoyed this video, you can always hit the like button. That's always pretty good. It always helps the algorithms. You don't have to purchase the packs to watch it, or watch these streams if you're really interested in the spirits as well. So you can always subscribe to the channel and hit this little notification bell, which will remind you when the next ones are. So if you do buy the packs and you're a regular on here, hit the notification bell, and then you don't have to worry about us sending you out the link. But yeah, that leads me to say thank you ever so much, everyone. Hope you really enjoyed these incredible rums. Thank you to Dean for taking us through, and we'll see you that way. So and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.